Now, hanging on to Batley and Spen may have eased the pressure on the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, for now. But even his deputy says that people don't quite know what he stands for. And an exclusive poll for Sky News found this week that 7 out of 10 Labour members would prefer to see the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, as leader. How long before another leadership challenge? Let's ask Sir Keir's most senior shadow cabinet colleague, Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves, Batley and Spen, a narrow squeak, but you won. Peter Mandelson says this gives Sir Keir until September to come up with a case for remaining leader of the party. Do you agree?
Well, it was a great result in Batley and Spen, and I can't tell you how pleased I am that Kim Leadbeater is going to be joining me in Parliament on Monday, tomorrow, as the Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen. And it's a seat that means so much to all of us in the Labour Party, and Kim is an inspiration. She will shake up Westminster in every good possible way. And that by-election, which I fought hard in as well, it's very near to me in Leeds West, was a by-election like none other that I have seen during my 25 years involved in the Labour Party and in politics. It was a campaign full of so much hatred and division, stoked by people from outside of Batley and Spen, and that victory in the early hours of Friday morning was a victory for decency over division, for hope over hatred, and for integrity in politics. And that is the Labour Party that Keir Starmer stands for, and it is the Labour Party that is embodied by the campaign that Kim and the team ran in Batley and Spen. So I am delighted by the result and can't wait to see Kim get started as MP in Westminster and in her community.
I fully understand that, but do you agree with the Mandelson deadline of September?
Look, Keir is elected as leader of the Labour Party. Today I'm setting out ambitious plans for Labour, for how, as Chancellor, I would ensure that we buy, make and sell more in Britain. And I think that the party in Batley and Spen came together under Keir's leadership with Kim as the candidate. It showed everything that is best about the Labour Party. And under Keir's leadership and with Kim in Parliament, I think that we can build on that success in Batley and Spen going into the summer, then with our party conference, and then campaigning at the next general election like we campaigned in Batley and Spen, go on for more victories going forward.
OK, well, you're not disagreeing with Lord Mandelson, but you are stressing the excellence of your stressing the excellence of your candidate.
No, Keir, under Keir's leadership, we won in Batley and Spen. Keir will take us into the next election, and I believe that that result in the early hours of Friday morning is the start of more victories for Labour.
All right, before we leave Batley and Spen, you spoke of the hatred and division being sowed in that election campaign, as did Sir Keir on Friday morning. Who exactly was sowing hatred and division?
Well, I mean, I was there on many occasions and I saw some of the behaviours of George Galloway and his campaign and the violence and aggression shown towards both Kim and other Labour activists. There is no place for the sort of behaviour that we saw in Batley and Spen in any election, but especially in a place like Batley and Spen that has been through so much in the last 5 years or so and deserved so much better than what they saw during this by-election campaign. And the people of Batley and Spen rejected that, and they voted for Kim. And Kim is now their MP, and I know that Kim will do everything in her power to bring the community together, as she has over the last 5 years, running schemes like More in Common, Batley and Spen. And I am so proud of Kim, but also of the people of Batley and Spen.
Thank you for being so clear in pointing the finger at Mr. Galloway. Does that mean that either the 8,200 and odd people who voted for him didn't realise what he was about, or that they actually like the idea of hatred and division? What's going on there?
There was a huge amount of fake news being pushed out in that constituency, and there was the whipping up of tensions that has no place in our democracy. Kim now has a job to do to bring that community together. I know that she can do that, and will start on that work immediately. I don't hold it against anyone for voting for different parties, but the role of an MP is to bring communities together, whoever they voted for, and show that decency and hope and integrity can triumph, as it did in Batley and Spen last week.
There is something that comes out of this well, two things that come out of this campaign. First of all, Labour Party issued a leaflet showing Boris Johnson and Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, together, with a caption saying, "Don't risk a Tory MP who is not on your side." What was that about? Why Mr Modi?
Well, if you look at some of the actions by Boris Johnson during the course of this pandemic, one of the things that stands out very sharply is the failure to close the borders properly to protect us from new variants of the virus, including the Delta variant. And the Prime Minister Johnson, wanted his trade visit to India to get a trade deal, but he put at risk the vaccine rollout and allowed new variants to enter the country. That is not responsible. That is not acting in the national interest. And Labour called on the government to close down that border to protect the UK long before the Prime Minister eventually woke up to the reality, the rising number of cases and the risk to our successful vaccination programme.
It is unusual to have a foreign leader on the leaflets of a candidate in a local by-election. I just want you to clear up the Labour view on the allegation that this was, I think the words that are being used are dog whistle to Muslim voters, that actually the Tories are in some way anti-Muslim and that they identify with what is said to be an anti-Muslim government led by Mr Modi. There's none of that going on here.
I don't accept that insinuation, Trevor. What we saw in Batley and Spen was underhand tactics by Galloway and his campaign, bringing in people from outside to whip up that hatred and division with actual violence and aggression towards the Labour candidate, harassing, intimidating, chasing her down the street, and also to Labour activists. That is the true nature of what was happening in Batley and Spen. But the people of that community rose above that and returned Kim as their MP last week. That is a great result for Labour. It's also a great result for Batley and Spen.
All right, let's talk about what you want to talk about today, which is your promise that a Labour government would make, buy and sell more in Britain and that you'd bring more jobs home. Is this an update to Gordon Brown's pledge of British jobs for British workers?
It's very different from that. This is about a post-pandemic recovery plan and how, as Chancellor, I would ensure that we support high street, small businesses and jobs and industry across the United Kingdom as we address some of the big challenges that we face as a country. And I put together a three-point plan to buy, make and sell more in Britain. And that includes using all the tools at government's disposal to do so. So, for example, with procurement, to use stretching targets in procurement to award more contracts to companies that are creating jobs and skills and apprenticeships here in Britain, to help businesses who want post-pandemic and also post-Brexit to reshore jobs, to make their supply chains more secure and resilient, to help them to do that, and also to sort out the big gaping holes in the Brexit deal that the government signed last year, to make it easier for British industries and workers to export goods and services across the European Union, especially in our creative industries, professional services and in farming and fisheries as well. And with that three-point plan, we can ensure that we're buying, making and selling more in this country, ensuring that the UK economy is firing on all cylinders and that we are more secure and more resilient in face of the sorts of shocks that any economy, and especially one that's been through everything we've been through in the last year and a half, to ensure that we are more secure and resilient in the face of those shocks.
I think this is what distinguished economists like yourself call a non-tariff barrier. So let's take an example and see how this would work in reality. Biggest construction project in the country, pretty much, HS2, high-speed line. 6 months ago, the bosses of HS2 picked a small group of construction companies to compete for contracts worth £2.5 billion for new rail lines. Now, just one of the companies they picked is British. Would your proposals mean that HS2, when they make their decision, would be more likely to pick the British company?
Well, I think that's a really good example, Trevor, because whether or not you think that HS2 should go ahead, and I know there are big differences of opinion on that, I think we can all agree that that investment should benefit jobs, skills, apprenticeships and businesses here in Britain, because it is in our national interest to create those high-skill, well-paid jobs. And what my proposals that I am setting out today of how I would approach this as Chancellor of the Exchequer would say that when you look at the different bids that come in for any project, whether it be HS2 or offshore wind or whatever it is, you can look at the plans of the businesses bidding for that contract to see what impact it would have on the wider UK economy, what strategic value a bid has. And if it is creating jobs in this country, high-skilled, well-paid jobs and apprenticeships, and that means that we're building up that skill set so we can export around the world, those bids should get more weight than bids that are creating no jobs, no skills and no investment in this country. So it's not saying that we won't give contracts to foreign companies, absolutely not, but it is saying, like in France and like in the United States, we would take into account the social impact of any public procurement. Other countries do that because they know it is strategically important. And yet, in the UK, we don't use those powers that we have at our disposal, and that is a mistake, and I would do that differently.
So you say this is a good example. So as Chancellor, what you would do is create an environment in which, in that case, the British company, Balfour Beatty, would be favoured. So you would be leaning on HS2 bosses to award the contract to a company implicated in the 2005 Hatfield rail crash, a company whose management has been was blacklisted because it blacklisted trade union activists and still faces legal actions from some unions, and a company which in 2019 was suspended from bidding for government work because it consistently made payments to small and medium-sized businesses late. Is that the sort of company that Labour wants to see getting the work because it's got a Union Jack on its website?
Trevor, it wouldn't be me as Chancellor leaning on public bodies to award contracts. What it is about is changing the procurement framework so you can take into account labour standards, job creation in this country and environmental standards as well. So there is a level playing field for businesses doing business in this country, and we take into account the whole value of the bid, including the impact it would have on the environment, on labour standards and on jobs in this country. As I say, under WTO rules, under the trade agreement that we did with our European partners last year, these things are possible. Other countries do it because they know it is strategically important. We should as well. And that would ensure that we create more good jobs for small businesses and large businesses here in Britain. And that is the right thing to do. It's not what is happening at the moment in a whole range of government contracts, whether it is offshore wind or HS2 or Trident submarines. We need to do things differently because we have to grow the industries of the future and ensure that there are more good quality, high-paid jobs in every corner of our country. And as Chancellor of the Exchequer, I would use every tool at my disposal to ensure that the UK economy is firing on all cylinders and creating more good quality jobs that you can raise a family on.
Just one very quick last question. This is your first big announcement as Shadow Chancellor. Your predecessor, John McDonnell, said that you can't understand capitalism without reading Karl Marx's Das Kapital. Have you had that privilege?
I haven't, Trevor, had that privilege of reading it, but I studied economics for my degree and for my master's degree. I worked for many years at the Bank of England, at the British Embassy in Washington as an economist, and for Halifax Bank of Scotland. So I hope my credentials speak for themselves. And as Chancellor, I would do things differently, but always ensuring that our policies are costed, that they add up, and that they are in the best interests of the British people.
OK, I'm sure Mr McDonald's got a spare copy to lend you if you want it. Rachel Reeves, thank you very much.